Greetings sailors and welcome back to World Warships and another destroyer replay, this time from a circling Menthel, who's actually my second in command in the Warships Circ clan. He's also a long-time Patreon supporter at, I think, the $1 plus level, like the base level I have on my Patreon. So, you know, not technically the replays tier, but I tend to treat replays that are sent by non-replays tier patrons as kind of regular viewer replays. So, you know, it'd be a bit silly if I excluded them because they were supporting me on Patreon and yet weren't on the replay supporter tier. That would definitely make no sense. I don't know why I'm off on this tangent now, it's just this is the way my brain has gone, but, you know. Anyway. So, he's in the Acasta, the Tier 5 Royal Navy destroyer, and it's been a while since I played this. I don't have any particularly abiding memories of it either way, but it's an okay little ship at Tier 5. It's only got 6 kilometer torp, so it can only just technically stealth torp with a gap of like 300 meters or something, because it's just under 6 kilometers surface detection, so there are things that can out-detect it at Tier 5, but not too many of them, and certainly when you're looking at it versus higher tiers, there are a lot of ships that it does also outspot there as well. But it does have a bit more limited utility in that it doesn't have the Hydra. I think it's only at Tier 6 when you get the Tier 6 and above that you get that defensive short-range Hydra. Still has those fast and often smokes though, so you know, they're good for popping off for getting a quick bit of damage, or if you need to disengage or break line of sight to a carrier. But fortunately there's no carriers in play in this game. This is a top tier 5 match, which is quite nice when you manage to see it in your Tier 5s, because it feels like it doesn't happen that often. So he's put one lot of torps out already. I don't know if he gets more than 1 or 2 torp hits in this game. This is mostly about the guns, and it's mostly about facing off against other destroyers as well. I'll say this right now, this is not going to be a super duper high damage game by anybody's reckoning. But he will still get a decent score out of it, because the raw damage numbers aren't, of course, the be-all, end-all. Especially when you're a destroyer, fighting other destroyers is worth a fair bit, contesting caps is worth a bit, and if you spot, that's worth a little bit as well, but not a lot. It's one of the few things I think World of Tanks really does do a heck of a lot better than Warships, is the ability to get sometimes quite high scores just from spotting damage, just from having assisted your team that much. World of Warships is not anything like the same in that way. This flank is looking a bit shaky so far. They've lost a couple of ships already. The cap is now potentially open for the enemy kamikaze to get, and although there are still 2 friendly battleships here, neither of them are especially fast. So they're not going to be making any quick getaways. I don't think the Cavour is especially stealthy. The Iron Duke is probably better. It is one of the hallmarks of Royal Navy battleships, as they do tend to have pretty good stealth overall. So Menthel really can't afford to be super aggressive here, but he can at least try and counter that kamikaze a bit. And there's also potentially a T-22 in the middle as well, and that's more of a worry in terms of its guns. The kamikaze does not have a particularly fast rate of fire, whereas the T-22, although it's small caliber guns, does fire a bit faster, and of course also has got its own pretty decent hydro. There's no sign of that destroyer so far though, and they are keeping the cap for now, so possibly they've swung a bit further south to try and drop torps on those 2 battleships. Who knows? Menthel meanwhile trying to maybe get a drop on that Oklahoma, but all of a sudden he's spotted. And what could have spotted him? It's the kamikaze, who possibly went up through the middle, or maybe skirted around the G line. But if they'd done that, would they not have gotten spotted Menthale sooner? I'm not sure. I have a feeling they zipped up through that middle island gap and came down round here, hoping to get the drop on those ships from the north. And it certainly would have been an unexpected direction for torpedoes to come from, but it was also quite a long time to be repositioning and not really doing much and leaving the cap uncontested. So now we have a bit of an interesting situation in that can reload its torps really quickly, even if the Acasta definitely has the firepower advantage. Although having said that, if you can land the hits, the Japanese 127mm shells do pack a fair punch. It's just the reload and the turret traverse that are fairly horrible. So going to try his own torpedoes out, and yes indeed, the Kamikaze has reloaded themselves, so bit of torpedo beating going on here, and he's not going to get any with that spread himself. So okay, now he's just got to wait for his turrets to come round. More torpedoes incoming. This is where in the tier 6 the Icarus, having that Hydra available for these knife fight situations would be useful. What's possibly even more useful right now though is that the Kamikaze is utterly neglecting their guns, so unless he eats a torpedo, he's coming out of this without having lost any health. There we go. He just gunned down that Kamikaze entirely. And in that kind of situation, although the Kamikaze has got that terrible rate of fire, you might as well shoot, because what else are you going to do? Now, I'll point out at this stage, you will have noticed, perhaps, that there were a lot more ships up north a moment ago. The battleships that were up there managed to die. I think there was a cruiser or two that managed to die. So we went from having quite a lot of ships up to the north to them just suddenly all dying in rapid succession. And this has actually put the enemy team almost on an even footing. They did just lose a Visby, which has put them ahead on some points. But yeah, that's quite a lot of ships to have lost. And they have just in return lost a Matsuki, so that just leaves the Jianwei up there. The T-22 that was poking around the middle though, they have been sunk by the Minikaze, but we have also just lost the Jianwei to the Visby that had just died, so that's the Flesh Wound award for them. But that does mean that there's now only 2 enemy destroyers left to worry about. And the T-22 probably was the most worrisome. So a bit more gunfire there, finishing off that low health Oklahoma, and we finally have someone going for that C cap. The A cap is now also wide open, but they are at least capping B. So it's not completely awful, but this is starting to reverse a bit in terms of map and cap control. Although in terms of ships and points, it's still really fairly close. Only 23k damage so far, but a fair bit of that has been against destroyers, and we're not actually done fighting enemy destroyers yet either, because of course there's still 2 left. So some speculative even torps out on that König. The Königsberg got taken down by the friendly Minikaze, which is good. And there we go, he's been spotted, so whoever's in this smoke knows that he's coming, so this is a bit risky. Depends if they've got torpedoes available or not. We don't know if... There we go, the Texas. Okay, I was going to say, we don't know if the Texas is looking at them or not. Well, there's the answer. No, they are not. Not the Texas. Why did I say Texas? König. König, Texas, they're 2 such similar words. So the destroyer that's here, I mean, they've got ample warning, and although Menthale does slow down a bit here, he's actually going to eat a Nicholas Torp anyway. He doesn't bring his nose in enough, and that almost killed him. The only saving grace here is that the smoke is now between him and the Nicholas. Otherwise, he'd be in a really bad spot right now with the Nicholas's very fast-firing guns. He's about to get spotted though, so he'd better kill this Nicholas pretty damn quick. And, hope that he doesn't take any fire in return, although he can afford to take 1 or 2 hits. And also, fortunately, the Nicholas was firing AP shells as well, for some reason. So we've now gone from full health, and this is with Survivability Expert, the 12,000, nearly 13,000 hit points. I think the default's like 11,500, something like that. And now they have to finish off this Koenig, who actually killed the Cavour. So there's still the Iron Duke here, and that's it. Everyone else is dead at this point, but almost the entire enemy team is dead as well. So once more into a smoke, and it's not a long smoke, but this is a low health ship, so it doesn't really matter. Let's just hope the Iron Duke can survive for the next few seconds, and then we have both a destroyer and another battleship to deal with. Now this enemy destroyer that's left, they're going to be a problem, obviously. 2,000 hit points is not a lot of hit points, all things considered, and he also has to be careful not to get seen by the battleship, although it's a Britannia, so it's fairly slow. So there we go, it's another Minikaze. Well, I say another, we had the Kamikaze, and the Minikaze is fairly similar. This one is actually using their guns and firing back and actually managing some hits. And so this is not looking good, this is looking damn dicey. In fact, he's now down to being a one hit. Pops his smoke, and here the low reload of the Minikaze really works in his favour, and it's actually going to be those torpedoes that finish the job. Although if they hadn't, he probably would have been able to do it with gunfire as well. I'm surprised the Minikaze didn't try some blind fire there. The rate of fire is pretty bad on that, but I'm pretty sure they'd reloaded in time to maybe try that. They also didn't put any torps out towards his smoke, although maybe they were on cooldown. But it's a really quick reload, so who knows? Maybe they just panicked a bit. So that leaves them ahead on points, but behind on caps with 2 players versus 1. And in terms of torpedoes, I mean, he could try a super risky ambush, but that would be kind of a silly thing to do at this stage. That would get him killed almost certainly and be quite hard to pull off. This thing, of course, does not have a speed boost in line with all the rest of the British destroyers. So it only puts us along at like 35 knots, a little bit more if you have a Sierra Mike flag. And of course there's now the Swift-in silence skill as well, but that's quite an expensive one, so I personally haven't taken that on too many ships, and I'm not sure if Menthel here has either. So really the best, most sensible thing he can do is spot for the Iron Duke, and if the Britannia comes towards them, he might be able to drop torps in their path as well. But yeah, if he smokes up himself at this point, he's running the risk of breaking the line of sight for the Iron Duke, so instead he's just holding fire on that for now, and you know, holding fire in the literal sense as well, because opening up right now would be a really silly move. We are very close to winning this on points. The Royal We, they are very close to winning this on points at this stage though, so just based on the points, even based on the time, less than 2 minutes, even if he did die, it wouldn't be a total disaster, but why take the risk? Although, talking of taking the risk, he's kind of inching up, trying to get that little bit closer before he launches torps, but I think he's being a bit, he's being a bit hampered by the not super great torpedo drop angles on this ship. So he has to be sitting kind of broadside-ish for this to work, but yeah. Now, I think that was a misclick, because he immediately smokes. But fortunately, the Britannia has just fired at the Iron Duke, and as it turns out, none of it matters anyway, because they have just won by points. And yes, you may have noticed, and I was going to comment on this at the start, but I totally forgot, that was indeed the Jingles captain that was in this. So, 33,700 damage, not the highest, but because some of that, indeed a decent amount of that, was facing off against other destroyers, including killing other destroyers, plus the capping work, that all amounted to a very healthy 1600 plus XP and being on top of the team. So yeah, it was interesting to see this game, you know, not maybe the most action filled apart from that kamikaze knife fight, and then running into the Minikaze at very low health, and maybe even the Nicholas could have been the end of him potentially, but yeah, no, he managed to just squeak through, stay alive, and end on only a couple of 100 hit points, and was certainly instrumental in winning that game. Plus, it's always just interesting to see mid-tier games that aren't just people, seal clubbing in certain ships that are very strong for their tier. Anyway, so that's it for this replay. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as usual, stay tuned for more.